Decoding Learning Differences with Cameron Lavelle, and this episode is to homeschool or public school. And I will start by saying it's a trick question because there are other options. And even if you choose one of them, it doesn't have to be strictly one or the other, and there's so many factors. So I just wanted to talk about basically our current choices in how we educate our children. Now, it depends a lot on where you live. If you live in a place that has a whole bunch of different schooling options, school choices, you have a lot of choice. There might be a ton of different alternative education and charter schools and magnet schools and all sorts of things that you can choose from. Most people don't have that many choices, but certain areas have certain options more than others. So just some things to think about and look at. Now, this question is coming because I've heard it since I was a public school teacher and just ongoing. It's a constant question of what do I do with my child that learns differently. My unique child is struggling. How do I help my kid? Now, sometimes it's, I'm trying to homeschool. I thought we would homeschool. I thought it would be beautiful, and I'm going crazy. And I want to send my kid to a public school, but I don't think I'm doing a good enough job, so I want to send them to a public school because maybe they can do better than I am doing. And I do want you to consider that, right? I want you to always think, like, do I have the capacity to provide a homeschool education for my children, for my child? And to what degree and for how long? And is it what my child needs or would benefit from the most? Now, not everyone has the ability to do that. It takes a lot of time and effort. But there's, depending on the age of your kid, sometimes you can still work full time if you have good supportive childcare available to you that can either do some of the homeschooling or can provide just the ability for the child to do some independent work, join classes on places like OutSchool has like Zoom classes. I'm not actually even sure if they're on Zoom or if they use their own platform or something. So I haven't used them myself. I just know about them. I've heard great things. So there's online classes that kids can take. There's online schools. The kids are online all day. They're providing all of the education. And for some kids, that works perfect, and the families love it. And for other kids, that's too much time on a screen, or they don't learn very well in that online environment. They would do better in a physical classroom. So it's all things to consider, and sometimes it's a matter of trying something. Now, if you don't think it's going to work, maybe don't try that first. You don't have to rule it out, but if you don't think it's going to work, maybe try the thing that you think will work first, and then just see how your child responds to it. So a couple of other things that I wanted to discuss here. We talked about homeschooling as a definite option. It requires something. I was going to try to list things, but actually it can look so different for every kid, and it depends also on what your take on the education is. People who are fully unschoolers, and even that is like to what degree and how much and what do they mean by that. So there's the more extreme side of unschooling is there is no lessons, there is no education, there is no agenda that your child learns anything in particular. And if your child never learns to read, then your child never learns to read because they didn't need to learn how to read yet, but one day they'll want to learn how to read because they'll want it for something, and then they'll choose to learn how to read. Now, personally, I can't totally get behind that because I do think that there are certain things that we need to learn when our brains are most ready for them. And if we wait too long and there's a learning disability on top of that, we are setting our child up to just struggle so much more for so much longer. But at the same time, I do understand a lot of the philosophy, and for a lot of kids, that works great, and it's not a problem at all. Obviously, you can tell I'm not that far. I do believe in child-led learning. I love that. I'm all about that. But there's also certain things that I just want to do. Now, a traditional public school, even there, you're going to have an individual teacher who is phenomenal and can really understand your child and meet all of their needs. And then the next year they go to a new teacher and it's horrible. And your child is miserable and struggling and losing ground and feeling terrible about themselves. So that's where it can get really tricky. It's like, well, it might be great or it might not be great, and it's hard to know until you're in it. But there's also public school, homeschool options. Like here in California, there's a lot of charter schools that only offer independent learning. So you're homeschooling, but you're homeschooling through what's technically a public school. It's a charter school. So your child is enrolled there. They're paying for the curriculum and classes that your kids are taking, and they're checking to make sure that you're actually teaching state standards, because they're a public school. They're, beholden to all of that you have to do the state testing when it comes up. You have to, progress has to be monitored just like at a traditional school, but the learning environment is very different. And a lot of people find that much more freeing and relaxing, and they're able to meet their child's needs in that way. Now, for some, that's not enough structure, or they themselves don't want their kid home that much, because there are some kids, and I do hope that this is not offensive to anyone. There are children who are very draining, and there are parents who are more easily drained. There are scenarios where a parent and a child home together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week would be a problem. And even if it's not home, but just together, even if they're going out and doing things, them being together and the parent then being responsible for making sure the kid is doing all of their schoolwork, as well as brushing their teeth and going to bed and eating their broccoli or whatever, like all of the parenting stuff, plus all of the teacher stuff, can be too much for some relationships, parent-child relationships, and it's not a good fit. And the relationship suffers, which then leads to the child suffering and the parent suffering. Everyone's kind of miserable. So they're like, I need my kid to go to a school for a few hours a day so that I can do my own thing. Or that I can relax, I can breathe, I can clean up the mess they made last night, or whatever it is that helps reset and helps you be a better parent. Or you just work too much and your child needs too much for that to work out. That your child needs to be at a school away from you during your work hours. Or for whatever reason, you need to send your child to a school, right? So there's, of course, the local public school, and that's everyone's first choice, but there are other choices beyond just doing that or homeschooling. Now, a lot of places have charter schools that are technically public schools, but usually you have to provide the transportation to the school. Now, more and more traditional public schools also require that you provide transportation to the school. The busing that used to exist is becoming more and more rare, so you might still have to do that. But a lot of them are specializing in something. There's also magnet schools that are really like specializing in science. They're specializing in art. They're specializing in theater. They're specializing in something. So your child is getting all of the subjects, but with a heavy emphasis and a lot of their time spent on this special thing that the school specializes in, emphasizes. And it's a lovely option for kids who are really into one of those things. And maybe a traditional public school wouldn't meet their needs. And this would really engage them and make them excited because they love sports so much and they really want to do sports all day. And at this school, there's a ton more sports available to them than the traditional public school. So those are things to look for. There's what is called, Steiner schools or Waldorf schools. It has a couple of names. And those tend to be, again, they're still depending on how they're run, either they're a private school that you're paying to attend, or I do know that there is an area in California that has a lot of them because the college that teaches it is like right there. And then, so a lot of them are right there. And there's quite a few public Waldorf schools, public Steiner schools. And so there's, for the elementary and younger ones, I know that they have no devices, no time on the computer. And then, so it's very much about kind of whimsical and magical, right? It's very, very artsy, the wooden toys and play silks and art as part of your lesson. Like you're drawing a beautiful picture to learn the letter A. You're not just doing a worksheet of tracing A a million times. And there's stories that you're using stories and games to learn every little thing. I'm not an expert in it. I know a little bit about it. So if I misspoke, I apologize. But that is my understanding. Lovely, right? And for some kids, that is perfect. But I've also heard from some parents that that's insufficient. It doesn't give them enough structure, or it doesn't give them enough practice in what they're struggling with. And sometimes whoever the support provider is, the kid can be on an IEP in one of these schools or a public school. So then they have a special ed teacher that's supposed to be meeting these needs, but sometimes it's not really happening. The needs are not really getting met. Now, there's also another kind of school that I find fascinating and interesting, and I think is perfect for some kids and would be a really terrible fit for other kids. And those are the democratic schools. They're not in California, but in America, on the East Coast, I believe, is the Sudbury schools, and those are democratic schools. And these are schools, and I'm sure there's different types of democratic schools. So just these are, again, everything I'm saying is my understanding of it, what I've experienced with it, my limited knowledge on these things, but just things to kind of like look for and think about and investigate, like, well, what part of this would work for me? Like, how can I make education work for my family to be successful? So one of the things that I was mentioning is the Sudbury schools, democratic schools. So these are run basically by the students. I believe they're all private schools in the United States. I don't think there's any public schools that are run this way because of how uniquely they're run. The students vote on whether or not a teacher gets to stay a teacher. The students vote on all sorts of things like this. And the students have meetings where they discuss problems that are happening at different times. The classrooms exist for the kids to come into whenever they feel like it. And they can be out on the playground as much as they want. They can do whatever they want. So there's a room to learn different things, and the children get to decide when they're going to learn those different things. And there's not any strong requirements that they do anything at any particular time, which is great for some kids, and it's super stressful to me thinking about children in that. And I wouldn't be a good teacher there. They would fire me immediately because I need more structure in my life, and I want to be able to plan lessons that go from day to day to day. And if I don't know what kid is going to walk in, I'm not going to plan a lesson. But that's not really the kind of lessons they want. They want to be, the kid is asking how to do something, and then you're teaching them how to do it. And the kids can also be teaching each other and learning from each other. And I think there are kids, especially the ones that just cannot be told what to do, or they're going to have a really hard time. you can either send them to a school that is going to punish them into obedience and make them miserable, but compliant in the end, or you can send them somewhere like this. Or, of course, there's other options, more middle ground kind of options. But a lot of kids really thrive in these places, especially when they find their intrinsic motivation to learn things. Kids do naturally want to learn things, and a traditional school often does suck the love of learning out of their life, and they don't want to do school anymore. They don't want to learn anymore. So, and that's what the unschooling thing is a lot about. Or homeschooling, homeschoolers also talk about deschooling, where you purposely aren't doing any school for a while until the love of learning comes back. And it's kind of both for the parent, teacher, and the child, that we're not doing traditional, structured anything. What do you want to learn? And just kind of waiting for the wanting to learn to come back before they start schooling, when you're doing the homeschooling. So a kind of similar type of thing would happen, my understanding, at the Sudbury schools, where kids for a while would be like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just staying outside all day. But then at some point they're wanting to learn something. The thing I don't know, and so this is my question, is in unschooling, there's what they talk about is like strewing, where you're like setting up an invitation to explore an idea. And the kid might not want to do it and you don't pursue it any further, but just giving them ideas. You take them places to get the idea of like, oh, I might want to learn more about that thing. So you're exposing them to a lot of things to get them to want to learn about all these things. Now, I would hope and I would assume that the Sudbury schools do things like this also, but I don't know. I don't actually know for sure. So it is a question. I do hope that all of that gave you some things to think about, maybe things to look into a little bit. I am always happy to answer questions. You can email me, Kimberlyn@decodinglearningdifferences.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. If you want to book a call, we can kind of brainstorm ideas and really investigate what's available in your area. But I do hope that was helpful.